I don't say this to scare people. This is not a scare tactic, but that's a good question. So if we're talking about endocrine disruption, the best way to manage that is, I didn't even know I was going to get so passionate about that. We aren't going to fix long-term problems by eating more protein. The only way to fix long-term problems is by,
One thing I definitely want to touch on is Ozempic.
I will say I turned down a really high six-figure deal because I am not behind it.
Cara, you're doing a fall back to health challenge where you're teaching people how to manage blood sugar, combine macros in a sustainable way, incorporate more colors, use seasonal foods, and space out meals correctly. Can we briefly go through each of these and you can share some tangible hacks for the listeners, like a little taste of what someone will get to take away from the challenge?
Yes, absolutely. We always say that you can't fail because you're always learning something.
I like that.
Yeah, I love that you dug up that information because it's so valid. And I feel like it sounds like a long list of things, but when you break it down into a tangible way, it actually makes things really easy, simplified, much easier than other programs out there. And it's sustainable for women.
Yes, that's so important too. And each one of these, as I was going through them, I thought, wow, as long as I've been in this nutrition health game,
Yes.
there are things in here that I could definitely learn.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times too for people, because I get so many repeat challengers is what I call them, participants, because they need the refresh. They need a guide. They need the roadmap. It's not, oh, while it can become something that like is second nature, we get out of the season of routine. Summer is not a season of routine. People crave that with fall. The energy of fall and autumn is routine and structure and like timing and like knowing the clock of the day. People are here for
Absolutely.
that. I am too, personally.
Yes, and I find that I will get stuck doing the same things, speaking of routine,
Mhm.
but and I don't know about different ways to approach things or maybe new information that can be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely something that happens to us too, which isn't the worst thing. I think sometimes we overrate variety. I think sometimes we try too hard with variety that it actually like could lead to a downward spiral.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So let's start with managing blood sugar. How can we get better at that?
So my whole food philosophy, which I started 17 years ago, was to manage blood sugar. I came about this in a way for performance nutrition. So I was a college athlete. We talked about sports briefly at the beginning of this call. I was a college athlete myself, and I always understood like that there's biohacks. Like, what is the biohack to being able to perform all day and having like strong cognitive functioning while I'm trying to learn, and then also be able to sleep at night because the adrenaline high lower performance athlete. And so when I was done with sports, I was like, well, doesn't everybody still want to perform in everyday life, right? There's ways for us to kind of like biohack that, and the best way to do it is managing our blood sugar. And so my entire philosophy is built around managing the blood sugar. When we manage the blood sugar, we are burning fat as fuel. And so we notice that our fat burns from our target zones, really, whether we're working out correctly or not. We notice more stable energy. With more stable energy, that is a chemical process, a biochemical process in the body. In order to have an output of energy, the input of energy needs to be like serving the homeostasis of the body, if that makes sense. And so we feel the output of energy when things are operating, correctly on the inside. So balancing blood sugars, I know, has become like trendy with the glucose goddess and like other glucose experts that are actually showing the graphics of how glucose is operating in our body, which is great. I've been teaching it for 17 years, so I love that it's trending now. I honestly feel like we shouldn't be allowed to use food until we understand this. Food is so haphazard without understanding managing our blood sugars. It is so dangerous to us. And I don't say this to scare people. This is not a scare tactic, but we were never taught to eat right or manage carbs. And that's terrifying. That's causing people heart attacks and strokes and diabetes and insulin resistance and skin conditions and autoimmune. And like, here you are, take whatever food you want from the grocery store. Well, pharmacy doesn't work that way. So why does food work that way? I didn't even know I was going to get so passionate about that. But like, I really wish that there was like, you have to take driving classes to drive a car, but we're supposed to operate this intrinsic body without any guidance and all of this crap thrown in our face constantly.
Yeah.
So managing blood sugars is the thing I'm most passionate about, obviously. And we do this by women, ladies. Here's our shout out. Eating within the first hour of waking up.
Okay.
I know this is something that has been controversial. I don't know why, but I think a lot of reason is because people feel like they have more control over their calories if they wait longer to eat. And so then they create this whole philosophy behind intermittent fasting to just to try to make that work for them. But it doesn't work for our hormones. It does not work for women's health overall in the long term. So eating within the
Why
hour.
is that?
So what happens, especially for women, we are delicate. Our hormones turn over, as you know this, every 28 days if we are blessed. We're on a rhythm, we're on a cycle if we are blessed. So even if not, it's like 21 to 35 days for most women. Even post cycling, we're still on a cycle. Okay. So men turn over every 24 hours. So they can be way more lenient. Things operate on a 24-hour clock. Our clock is with the moon, essentially. So anyways, long story short, if we're not utilizing food to fuel our systems, then our body will draw from cortisol. This is showing that our bodies will draw, and lots of research, that our bodies will pull from cortisol. And so when we're overusing cortisol, our adrenals become weaker. And when our adrenals become weaker or more sensitive or resistant, then our cortisol isn't being managed correctly. And so we want to make sure we're utilizing our food to fuel the biochemical cycles in our body. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so if we are like stealing from stress hormones, then something has to fuel those stress hormones. So when our adrenals run out, the first thing to go is progesterone. And that's when women say, well, I have estrogen dominance. I feel like I have well, why do you have estrogen dominant? Let's get to the root of that. And then we're like, oh, are you eating within the hour of waking up? That's an easy fix. So
Okay.
I'm all about the root cause. Like, I'm not going to stop at like, take this supplement because you're low in that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So eating within the hour of waking up and every 3 to 4 hours after that, we would like it to be every 4 hours, but you know, we have busy lives. Like we can't just completely manage things perfectly every day. So that 3 to 4 hour window is kind of when our blood sugar starts to drop and our body might need some reserve, you know? So every 3 to 4 hours after that, and always combining our macros. So this is what is interesting to me about Glucose Goddess and like other experts like that. And she does a great job, so I'm not putting her down, but she always shows like how one food works by itself. Well, why don't we show more how eating carbs with fat and protein works together? Because then it kind of like villainizes carbs. And carbs work for so many things for the female endocrine system and our brains. Our brains function on glucose, which comes from carbs. So like we can't reserve protein. We can kind of reserve fat, but like we use carbs right away, you know? So we need to be utilizing that. We need to be balancing it. So balancing our macros, 50% carbs, 25% protein, 25% fat every time we eat, unless being instructed on a bio-individualized basis because we're using like a glucometer and we're trying to reset our insulin or something like that. Does that make sense?
Definitely. And there's actually another thing, I'll just go on a little side tangent for a moment. Speaking of glucose goddess, I wanted to hear your thoughts on sugar because a lot of her graphs, when she talks about, show these graphs, with huge spikes that have to do with sugar. And she talks about it like fruit is the same as drinking a can of soda. And for me, I just can't wrap my head around that. So I wanted to hear what your thoughts are regarding sugar.
Yeah, I actually kind of got a little controversial on one of her posts not that long ago about honey,
Mhm.
because she was doing the same thing with honey. But when something is working in our body for greater good, like it has enzymes, it has coenzymes, it has some have, fruit has a ton of fiber. Fruit has the most potent antioxidants that the earth has to offer. So, like, are you just going to supplement those antioxidants when you could actually digest and absorb them and combine them correctly and utilize them? So, yeah, I completely disagree with that. I think that originally when she started out, it wasn't like demonizing carbs and sugars. It was showing people, but for some reason, everybody kind of takes the turn of like carbs are bad. And like we get obsessed with how our body looks. And we know that protein, we know what protein does to our body. And so we just get obsessed, but that's not really a sustainable approach. And so that scares me a little bit too, because when you tell people to stop eating these foods, again, they're going to have to supplement more because they're missing so many of their phytonutrients when we're not eating all those colorful foods. I teach 5 colors a day, as you saw, 5 colors of fruits and vegetables a day. So yeah, I'm a very pro that anything that is grown and not processed is a go.
So is that 5 specific colors, or you just want 5 different colors incorporated into your meals?
5 different colors incorporated into your meals, and we have 6 to choose from, really, because brown and white have the same nutrient profiles.
How would you
So does
categorize?
purple and blue.
Okay. How would you categorize a potato? Like a red or a yellow?
So the cool thing about fruits and vegetables with a skin and a flesh is they can count as 2 different colors if you're eating the skin and the flesh. So like a
Ah,
red potato still has benefits of a red, and then the white and brown of the potato. And again, like we utilize potatoes because they're resistant starches. In the next few years, everybody's going to know what resistant starches are, just like everyone knows what probiotics are. It just hasn't come full circle yet. So people are going to be using all different kinds of potatoes, not just sweet potatoes. Again, at some point, and enjoying their lives and like having the pleasure experience that you're supposed to get from food.
yes, and not being afraid of it. I feel like there's a lot of fruit fear, sugar fear out there.
I always go back to the comedian, I think it's Nate Bargatze. I could be wrong. I'm not really good with names, but he says in one of his skits, tell me one of your friends that's fruit fat. I want to know one of your friends that has become
Mhm.
fruit fat, because everybody tells me that fruit can make you fat, but I've never seen it happen.
Yes, I've actually seen that clip. I don't know who said it either,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. It's my favorite because it's so true. And like, as long as you're combining your macros and you don't have major insulin issues, that's the thing is like, if you're coming to me and you're like having long-term chronic inflammation, or that you have insulin resistance, then I'm going to be a little bit more specific on how we start. I'm
hmm,
still not going to cut out fruit, but I'm going to be a little bit more specific at the timing of the day of it and how we combine it.
mhm.
I'm not cutting it out. It has too much to offer.
Yes. Okay, I got us a little bit off track. We talked about combining macros and incorporating more colors using seasonal foods.
So
That's a good.
yeah, seasonal foods are at the height of their nutrients. So a lot of times when we're using like frozen fruit, for example, going back to fruit for smoothies or whatever, those were flash frozen at the height of their season.
Mm,
So if a food's not in season, the frozen is the next best option. So like right now we're still using a bunch of summer harvest. But as like September rolls around, that summer harvest kind of switches into fall harvest. And so we always want to just be mindful of like, where can we get the best nutrients from? And that's what is meant to be harvested in that season. Just so not only enhances the nutrients we get, but it enhances how our bodies can absorb the nutrients, so the bioavailability, and even potentially our digestion. If we're always eating out of season and we have digestive issues, that would be like the first thing I would start on. So we do seasonal challenges to incorporate seasonal foods that are at the height of their nutrients so that people can automatically feel the difference.
I feel like there must be a reason too that is even that certain foods grow in different seasons. Like that's what our body is supposed to
Mhm.
have during that time of the year. So then it makes me question though, but I mean, I always have frozen fruit. I mean, pretty much every day. But if it's only available for part of the year, should we not have that frozen fruit for the other parts?
No, I think frozen fruit's always okay. It's always a good option. Yeah.
Okay, good. I always wondered that.
Yeah. Well, that's like me with apples. Like I'm never going to go a whole day without some sort of apple, even though I know they're not necessarily like the most seasonal in certain times of the year. I'm not saying that only eat that way. There's no like hard and fast with me. We still want to make it work. We never want to like have strict rules that turn people off, you know? So
Mhm.
we are still going to look for convenience, if that makes sense.
And I'm curious what your thoughts are on organic versus non-organic, and do you peel your apples?
Yeah, I try not to peel my apples, but obviously we're always going for organic. And then now we have the whole appeal thing that we have to look for. So there's so many elements that you just got to pay attention. Obviously, if you know your farmer, even better, you know. So if you can get these things from farmers markets and whatnot, but I like to do, especially when I reserve the time and energy, vinegar wash with everything. It really like cuts through any pathogens, any wax, any buildup. But yeah, I'm always
Really?
the skin. Yes.
So it will take the wax. That's what I get concerned about on
Mhm.
cucumbers and apples is the wax on the outside.
Mhm. Yeah. And I'm always going to go organic when I can, if that's an option, even like beyond the dirty dozen. I'm going to always just try to go organic. And another fun thing about like, fun fact, oranges, the brighter they are, the more they've been messed with.
No,
Dull the color, the more natural. It's like things like that. And I think I saw something going around about watermelons too. It's something about the rind having like less um coloring on it or something like that. I can't even remember what it was because I mean we don't eat the rind, but we want to know like how much things have been modified, you know?
definitely, yes. I know there's a few little hacks I know when walking around the produce section, like with limes, you want them to be more yellow than green.
Mhm.
And with peppers, red, yellow, and green, they actually all start out as green. So
Yes,
green aren't ripe.
right. They taste that way too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
And
usually eat
still,
yellow.
but so the way that phytonutrients work is they are interacting with the sun and the soil. And so you still get like green benefits from them, even though they aren't necessarily totally ripe. So there's still like some benefits to be had. Like you still can't go wrong necessarily, but yeah, you can taste the difference. They taste like water practically.
Yeah, they don't have as much
Mhm.
flavor as the yellow and red. So, but you're not doing your body any harm though by having them, even though they're not really
Not
ripe.
necessarily.
Yeah.
You're just not giving it as much as you possibly can.
Okay. And then the last part of your challenge, spacing out meals correctly, which we did talk about. You want to start eating the first hour of waking and then 3 to 4 hours after that. And then do you want to stop 3 to 4 hours before bed?
That would be the goal, but again, we try not to like have the hard fast rule on that one. If somebody's coming to us with like a big need to lose weight, for instance, then I would make that a little bit more like rigid. But I know in my own life, like from 2:30 to 9:30 almost every night, I'm like shuffling kids around. So if I had that hard, fast rule for myself, I could be like severely under eating.
Mm.
So I guess even that is like pretty bio individualized. I would love for people to not eat but an hour or two before they go to bed, because our bodies work on a circadian rhythm. I'm sure you've heard this before. And so we need to be in rest mode when we go to rest. If we're digesting when we're trying to rest, that could throw off our melatonin.
Yes, okay, I have talked about this before, because also when you're sleeping, that's when the deepest healing occurs.
Mhm.
And if your
My
body's
kids
working
don't
on,
feel good. I'm like, go to sleep. Just literally like go to sleep. Do anything you can to go to sleep.
yes, yes, and if you have food in your stomach, then your body's working on digesting the food
Mhm.
versus doing the healing
Yes.
on your cells. Yeah.
Yeah, so every zone in the night, according to like Chinese circadian rhythm, has a healing window. So like for instance, if metabolism is your focus, then your human growth hormone is activating before midnight. So like sometimes with people and they want to lose weight, all I have to do is put them on a 9 o'clock bedtime. They have a lot more time for that human growth hormone to be activated and recovered and restored. So like the other thing is like sometimes people are waking up between 2 and 4, and we can go to that like Chinese circadian rhythm when or chart and see that that is 2 and 4 is the liver, or like 3 and 5 could be the gallbladder. We throw on a castor oil wrap, problem solved. So like if we know what we're supporting, have you ever seen that chart?
No, and
Mind
please tell me
boggling.
more.
Yeah, it's mind boggling. So I have a lot of clients that come to me after they get their gallbladders removed. And so I'm like, okay, well, if your gallbladder is waking up, we have to support the kidneys and the liver a little bit better, because those are the ones that are taking over and they're taking on more work, because the vital, all of our organs are vital, like from our tonsils to our adenoids to our appendix to our gallbladder, like everything is vital. There's very few reasons to have these taken out, but a lot of times it's too late by the time I meet with people. So we go through that circadian rhythm chart and we start where they are the most bothered. We support that organ on a deeper level, and it usually resolves the issue. But like I said, like people don't realize they could lose weight by going to bed earlier. Like what? Like they think they have to take all this colostrum and stuff or whatever, like supplement, ads, but just support. Like there's so many free ways that we can support our bodies. Right now, I'm in a 90-day healthy hormone challenge with my membership. And they're probably getting annoyed because all I've been teaching on is stress and nervous system. And they're like, what about estrogen?
Mm.
Well, literally the freest, most practical, most effective way to heal our hormones is through our nervous system. And so understanding the ins and outs of the physics of the nervous system will actually reset every hormone in our body, because they communicate with each other constantly. But instead, we want to take this, we want to take that, we want to take this. And then before we know it, we have all these band-aids all over our body, and we have like, you know, tape over the holes that are shining their issues. And then it's just like this masterpiece of like, not restoring, this masterpiece of like not supporting. And so
Yeah,
like you support starting with the circadian rhythm, starting with maximizing how your blood sugar works, maximizing how glucose gets to your brain. Glucose also fuels your liver. If our liver is not getting enough the correct glucose, then that could get sluggish and backed up. And next thing you know, we're doing a liver cleanse, or we're doing like parasite cleanses. And like, don't even get me started on doing all these things without supporting the foundations.
incredible. Okay, that was a really great visual and two different questions. One is with the sleep piece. What if you're drinking? Okay, because this happens to me. I'll wake up around 3 a.m. and I'll need to use the restroom. Is that
You
telling me
go,
something about one of my
do you go
organs?
right back to sleep?
Yes.
That's not a big issue to me. Our
Okay.
bodies do produce an antidiuretic um, hormone while we sleep, but managing our urine and our kidneys working, but going right back to sleep, that's not something I would address.
Okay, so you know it's an organ problem if you wake up and then you can't fall back asleep.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then like, in order of health, sleep is always number one. But you can't just get better sleep by going to sleep. It just doesn't work that way. Like in order to get number one, you have to support two and three, which is food and exercise. And we abuse exercise as a culture. We abuse it. We abuse food. We abuse exercise. We don't sleep.
Mhm,
And we expect our bodies to just keep going.
mhm. Yeah, I'm more so like laughing at this because I've definitely been there. I'm sure you have too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then on the regulating your nervous system, I read on your Instagram, you can't out protein a dysregulated nervous system. I love that so much. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. I don't think it resonates with everybody because they don't really know what that means. And I was speaking on behalf of people that think that they can fix all their problems by eating as much protein as a man. And we are not biologically little men. We just aren't. There's nothing in our bodies that match to support those needs. So protein, just like carbs and fat, are macronutrients. We need an abundance of them. We need a lot. Um, but if we have too much of it, it could cause issues with our kidneys. It could cause a backup again to the liver. It could cause, we don't all produce the right stomach acids to even break down protein. So like, what if we are overeating protein, or what if we're eating this high amount of protein because our trainer told us to, because it's always coming from the fitness side. All they care about is seeing results in their client. They don't think about the intrinsics of hormones and nervous system and immune system, all the crap I have to deal with
So
because
true.
they over proteined their client. And I'm like, you have digestive issues, which means your stomach is not producing the acids that you need to break down the protein. So then what? Like it's actually just causing more inflammation, right? And so with the inflammation in our gut, our nervous system is going haywire. And that sends us into this like loop of mixed messaging. Like you're not even using the protein at that point. Like the fastest way to heal the body. I did several courses over the last year, and the thing that stood out to me is Dr. Cabral's teachings. I don't know if you follow along with him.
I know the name.
Okay, so like 90% of his teachings I already agreed with, and then like 5% I adapted to, and then 5% I disagree with. So that's a lot of agreement. um, but he taught, and I have always taught this because people want to do like gut health work and they want to do like inflammation work, like they want to do stuff that gets them results quick, but they want to do parasite cleanses, all that. He teaches that first there's a stress that leads to a breakdown in the nervous system, that leads to a breakdown in the hormone system, that leads to a breakdown in the immune system. Well, when do we start working on our bodies? When there's like a web of breakdown in the immune system. The fastest way to heal that is to recognize our stress, which we can't, especially if it's a loop from like childhood, right? So like people talk about the connection to childhood trauma or like things that happen in childhood. I'm not the expert on that. If you know that stress and you can recognize that and you can remediate it, and like, great, but most people can't. So the fastest way to remediate the body and restore the body is through the nervous system. If we can change the way the HPA axis communicates, then we can digest food better because the HPA axis includes our gut. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah.
And that's all through the nervous system. Like I actually just got chills saying that. That's how accurate that is. um, so yeah, we aren't going to fix long-term problems by eating more protein. The only way to fix long-term problems is by rewiring the nervous system.
I've gotten so many aha moments through this entire conversation so far. This is so good. Okay. So how does someone know if they're having all these different issues and it's worked through their body in these different systems? How do they know that it's their nervous system that they need to regulate? And how do they begin doing that?
Um, moods and reactions, if you want to test, you can test neurotransmitters. Um, you could even, like, I could look at a blood panel and see that there's nervous system dysregulation. I can see when stress and dehydration are coming into play. Um, that's nervous system. Stress or dehydration can sometimes just be, an imbalance of electrolytes or minerals, but often it's because of stress, right? So, how you react to things. Are you overwhelmed? Are you easily stimulated? Are you easily overwhelmed? And then is your energy high, low? So those are symptoms, like very obvious symptoms of nervous system dysregulation. The other one that I think is fascinating is when your voice is like you can't express, or what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like a really soft, like monotone. That's nervous system dysregulation. I can think of 5 people off the top of my head who have a voice like that.
Wow.
Mostly men.
Really?
Men have, like, women work on our nervous system. We journal, we like go on walks, we spend time in nature. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like we do a lot of things. We do lymphatic work and all of that. Men are like, they kind of just have their modes.
Yeah. Do you think that they suppress things more? Is that why?
I mean, I wouldn't put like that general blanket on it. Probably that is why. I think that, they have a huge burst of testosterone once a day, and they kind of like ride that wave. And then when that wave's over, they kind of like just,
Flatline.
yeah,
Yeah.
instead of manage, right? So that will lead to nervous system dysregulation. There's 3 levels of stress, or there's 3 types of stress in the body, and we obviously have the emotional card, but we also have like stuff you can't manage, like the work stress, or stuff that's like family stress or whatever. But then we have like GI stress, like we don't know we have pathogen resonance or existence, right? And that can lead to nervous system dysregulation. So like, I know it's not an easy answer. A lot of times people do need a practitioner to kind of get to the root of it, but ways that you can like help support your nervous system on a daily basis are eating my food philosophy. Believe it or not, eating the right foods at the right times, the right quality of foods can help manage the nervous system. But then taking a minute or two before every meal, I mean, prayer before meals, right? So you're using this like prayer time to do some breath work so that you're in a parasympathetic state when you eat. So you can control your parasympathetic system. When you do that, your vagus nerve calms down. That, along with the HPA axis, sends signals to your gut that like digesting is safe. So when we're in a heightened state all the time, it's not really that safe to eat.
Right.
So calming our bodies before we eat is the first way to manage the nervous system.
Mhm.
And then resetting our PNS, the parasympathetic nervous system, like 3 times a day. Otherwise, like for me, I get super heightened when the afternoon of, this kid needs to go here, there, and everywhere. So then I do a lot of box breathing just to manage and regulate. And then there's different techniques for breathing into the night from day to night. So like the day to night breath work is short inhales, longer exhales. Daytime is equal inhale to exhale. So that
Okay.
tells our body like, okay, this is, where we're at in the day if we're not regulated with the sun, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yes. Um, Me personally, if I'm hearing this, I'm like, okay, I'm good if I remember to take a deep breath. Like I can't remember to do different types of breath work throughout the day. So if there's other people listening that are thinking the same thing, what's one way that they could just reset in a moment? Is there a certain type of breath work, or do they, I know the box breathing is great because you
Mhm.
inhale for 4, hold for 4, and let out for 4.
Mhm.
Is that a good
Yeah.
one to just
Yeah, I
use?
love box breathing and I love diaphragmatic breathing. Those are the best daytime ones when you're not like trying to add any load or stress to your life. Um, just taking 1 minute for box breathing. I usually do 5 in, hold for 5, 5 out, hold for 5. And then diaphragmatic breathing, the goal is to get to 10. But most people you can tell your nervous system health by what number you can get to on your breathing.
Okay. Oh, I can't wait to test that.
Yeah.
Digging into hormones a little bit more because it's such a hot topic. Hormone disruptors are everywhere and it feels like they're constantly changing. How can we improve our hormone health?
That's a good question. So if we're talking about endocrine disruption, the best way to manage that is by decreasing the toxic load by changing the products that we use that go on our skin. So our skin's our biggest organ, and I think we sometimes forget that. And they say research shows that it can absorb up to 70% of what goes on our skin could potentially get into our bloodstream. So managing what goes on the skin is the way that I always start with, like decreasing toxic load and managing endocrine disruption.
Okay.
My other favorite way that is a hot topic is decreasing electromagnetic fields. So using wired headphones rather than AirPods and not wearing smartwatches all the time and not having any of that stuff by us when we sleep, making sure nothing's plugged in and any outlets behind our heads.
Mm. Okay, I'm thinking about the outlet that's behind my bed right now.
As long as nothing's plugged into it, it should be okay. But you could also put in blockers. I don't know that those work. There's not a ton of data backing that up yet, but as long as nothing's like charging behind your head. So that's the other thing I tell people. There's so many kids with sleep issues these days. Unplug anything that's near them.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense. Um, one thing I definitely want to touch on is Ozempic.
You listen to the Pursuit of Wellness podcast, right?
I did, and I would just love for you to share your thoughts on it. I've listened to a lot of things that um surprisingly share a lot of positive effects of
Yeah.
Ozempic. And so I started out as completely on the other side of no, absolutely not. This is not a good thing to okay, maybe I could see how it could be good for some people, but I'm
Mhm.
curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so there's always like the pendulum swings both ways. And, I came across as acting like I'm completely against it and the other podcast. But if you listen to the whole thing, that's not what I said at all. So I said, and I believe that the risk has to outweigh, or the benefit has to outweigh the risk. So if somebody is just taking it for vanity reasons, but like otherwise pretty healthy, the benefit doesn't outweigh the risk. The risks are stomach paralysis, and that is showing up more and more. What happens when something is FDA approved and like big pharma is supportive of it is that the danger stories and the harm is not disclosed or shared as much about because there's nobody to sue. Like you're in a situation where you're taking on the risks, right? So like that's part of it. We're not hearing the horror stories because those aren't being promoted or shared. They're being censored and hidden. Um,
Right.
but for some people that have serious like insulin resistance issues or diabetes, then the benefit outweighs the risk. And so it's just really a personal thing. If you've tried everything for weight loss and you've even tried an anti-inflammatory approach to weight loss and nothing is working, a short term, monitored by a functional medicine doctor using semaglutide is not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've gathered as well from everything that I've heard. And it's interesting that you bring up how they are selective with what they share as far as
Mhm.
the outcomes from whoever's using it. Because looking at the COVID vaccines, you wouldn't hear about all the tragedies. You had to really dig to find out all of the awful things that were happening from that. And that's because, they want you to get that.
Mhm.
And it's the same, with this, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, like never learn how to eat right, just take a pill, right? And so it's become too accessible, I think, that people love a quick fix and they don't want to have to be disciplined and put in the work. But there's so much like meaning and purpose, and like again, it impacts our neurotransmitters when we put in the work, and it impacts our whole body. When something is doing the work for us, I mean, are we getting the serotonin release? Are we getting the dopamine that we need? I know we're losing muscle mass. So like that's dangerous in itself. So yeah, I just always look at it like, does the risk outweigh the benefit? What is the benefit? What is the long-term reward here? So I'm not like completely opposed to it, but I will say I turned down a really high six-figure deal because I am not behind it.
Ah, wow. Yeah, I actually read something
Be
recently
a
that
spokesperson for it.
no, really.
Oh yeah, even back in 2020, I was getting offered to money to tell people to wear masks and get vaccinated. If you're
Yeah.
getting offered money to tell people these things, like what? But I've been studying vaccines since I was pregnant 15 years ago, so I know how these things work.
And do you mind sharing? I know you have four girls. Did you choose for them to get any vaccines?
I did the modified doctor's series schedule, but we lived in California at the time. So I wasn't, again, I'm not like all or nothing, but if I were to have babies now, I might be nothing. I might be more on the other side of the pendulum. Um, I have a child who was vaccine injured from that. So it's alarming, and I had a doctor whisper in my ear, please don't come back here. There's nothing we can do to help you.
Wow.
Yeah. And she was helping us by saying that. She was saying, like, what you're doing for your daughter is working. What we're going to do for her will not. Because
Mm,
they tried to tell me there was nothing wrong with my kid, even though she was like jaundice looking. Her stomach was protruded. She was not healthy at all. She's 4 years old, thanks to the MMR. Had high fevers for 6 months straight. That's normal because she's in preschool. Had eczema. That's normal because she's white. Had all these issues that they tried to tell me were normal. Um, and I can't even imagine like the decline of her health if I didn't do all of these alternative options.
right.
And it scares me to think how bad it could have gotten. So, yeah, I probably would be on the other end of things. I just don't
Yeah.
think it's necessary. I think the immune system was created in a way that it could function without, high doses of heavy metals and
Right. Right. I think something that a lot of people don't talk about enough is that Western medicine, it's a practice. It's called practice.
Mhm,
And it's called patience because they're figuring stuff out. Like they're
mhm.
testing things. They don't have it all figured out. It's a business.
Well, that's science. Science is changing by the day. Like the evolution of nutrition has changed a lot in 20 years.
Mhm.
Like I see a lot of, for instance, I feel like oncology, there's a lot of medical doctors shifting to a more integrative approach, but they can't do that with their MD attached, because I feel like Western medicine is like 20 years behind in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah, because they don't have the studies and the proof to back it up. And yeah.
Well, and it's just treating symptoms. It's not treating the body. And I'll never forget a podcast I heard, and I know we're like getting off topic here, but it was the actual, I don't know, remember if she's an emergency doctor or she was a triage doctor in the labor and delivery. I can't remember. She was one or the other, but she herself was having a baby and she had HELP disorder. And I can't really describe that, what it is exactly, but it's a very dangerous situation for somebody in labor. But I don't remember exactly what the disorder syndrome is. But she could hear everything the doctors were saying and doing, but she couldn't talk to them. And basically what happens and what it woke her up to is like they treat the disease, they don't treat the person. And that's a scary thing because we are mind, body, and spirit. And there is so much proof to that and so much relevance to that. And I notice when I treat the spirit, the mind and body automatically become healthier. Like I could cry how many people have had insane healing stories by treating their spirit. And that's their nervous system.
I just got chills when you said that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have cried over my clients before because they have been to every specialist and every doctor and every, person that could help them. And we worked in reverse, because they are a whole person. They aren't their condition. Their condition is conditional. And so I think what woke me up too when I heard that podcast, what woke her up is like we are, even like if you look at the cells of a person, we are more than the disease, but when
Mhm.
somebody's treating you and just treating the disease, then you kind of become like victim to that.
Mhm.
I'm not saying there's not a time and place. Like I just made my husband get on antibiotics because he had pneumonia this summer. So like there is a time and a place. Of course, we have a whole recovery protocol from antibiotics too. But yeah, there's a time and a place.
Yeah. Speaking of, energy body and everything that we can't see, I wanted to just touch on how you said praying over your food before you eat. Is that blessing your food, it raises its vibration just in an instant, just by blessing it before you put it in your mouth. So I forgot to mention that before. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I love that. I'm really into the wavelengths that our body sends off. I'm into energy. It's biblical, really. Like I'm a Christian worldview, and like I believe all that. Even saying God's name, it raises your vibration, So like, of course, blessing your food raises the vibration of the food, and it also settles the body down to incorporate the food, to invite the food, to welcome the food.
Mm. Kara, what is your number one health tip? So whether that is diet, mindset, nutrition, physical, emotional, just the one piece of advice you want everyone to know.
It's always been for 17 years to learn how to balance your blood sugars.
I'm still learning that.
Yeah, many people are. And
Yeah.
it'll always probably be that. Because like we are physical beings. So like I'm not gonna say the number one tip is spiritual or nervous system related. The number one tip is clinical because most of our day is spent physical.
Yeah. Yeah. And these bodies are not always easy to figure out.
No, they're not.
I'm starting a new tradition where I'm asking you a personal question at the end. So you are going to pick a number 1 through 100, and that will be your question.
Okay. I don't know why 82 came to mind.
All right, 82. What's your favorite way to volunteer and give back?
Oh my gosh. Through the church. I've always like enjoyed volunteering if I can through the church. But right now I'm in a state of constant care for my kids, driving them around. So volunteering, I feel like is something that I would look forward to more when I'm an empty nester.
That's very understandable. 4 children and a thriving business. Yes. Where can people go to learn more? Where should we send all the listeners?
The website is the best place to start at www.caraclarknutrition.com. And then from there, you can find all my socials, my blog, my Substack, where all the information lives. we have a really thriving membership right now, if that is something that is of interest to learn the ins and outs of the body, obviously through food, but then beyond that, with kind of like the conversation we had today, but we divided up into themes, 4 themes throughout the year. So membership, you can find that information on my page as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Cara. This has been such an incredible conversation, probably one of the favorites I've ever had on here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.